Day 108 of the war in Gaza, and Defense Minister Gallant says that the IDF is now hot on the heels of Hamas's top leadership, amid heavy bombardment and ongoing fighting in and under Khan Yunis. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
Defense Minister Gallant flew over Gaza before a meeting with representatives of hostage families and told them that the IDF is reaching closer to finding captives than they had been until now. Gallant later issued a statement saying that the battles in Khan Yunis were at a high point and there were signs that the IDF was reaching the most sensitive Hamas locations and the goals of the war, dismantling Hamas and returning the 130 Israeli hostages. The defense minister said that the ground offensive in and around Khan Yunis was expanding and would continue. The heavy bombardments today in Khan Yunis underlined Gallant's comment: the plumes of smoke from the tanks, artillery, and Air Force planes will continue to cover the skies of the Gaza Strip until we achieve our goals, chief among them the defeat of Hamas and the return of hostages to their homes. The complication for the IDF is that the Hamas leadership is believed to be hiding in tunnels deep under Khan Yunis and nearby Rafiah. It's believed that many of the Israeli hostages are held in cells in those and other underground locations. War Cabinet Minister Gadi Eisenkot tempered public expectations of potential Entebbe-like freeing of hostages.
הם מפוזרים באופן כזה גם בממד התת-קרקעי בעיקר, שהסבירות אחרי אורי מגידיש סבירות נמוכה ביותר. עדיין עושים מאמצים ומחפשים כל הזדמנות, אבל הסבירות לזה היא נמוכה, ולהגיד שזה יגיע משם זה לזרוע אשליה.
Prime Minister Netanyahu has repeatedly said that the policy is to increase the military pressure on Hamas to a point where a reasonable mediated agreement can be arranged to release the hostages. 78 Israeli and dual national hostages were released as part of the exchange deal at the end of November. Netanyahu has said that it was military pressure that forced the agreement on Hamas.
They deny the kidnapping of our children, the murder of our grandchildren, the rape of our daughters. The new Nazis we face today will stop at nothing to destroy civilization as we know it. The World Jewish Congress was created exactly for these times like this, so every Jew can fall asleep at night knowing they are safe in their own home. We are a voice for the Jewish people everywhere. We are the World Jewish Congress.
And the U.S., Egypt, and Qatar are reportedly pushing Israel and Hamas to accept a comprehensive plan that would end the war in Gaza. According to the Wall Street Journal, the agreement envisions the release of hostages held in Gaza and ultimately full normalization for Israel with its Arab neighbors. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu openly rejected the deal, saying he would not agree to any capitulation to Hamas. ILTV's Devo Klein has more.
The so-called plan to end the war was not greeted warmly in the Prime Minister's office. According to the Wall Street Journal, the U.S., Egypt, and Qatari proposal plan would include several stages and would take 90 days to complete. It begins with an extended halt in fighting, with the terrorists freeing all civilian hostages. Prime Minister Netanyahu said the hostages will be returned by IDF military pressure. According to the plan, Israel would simultaneously release hundreds of Palestinian security prisoners, along with an IDF pullout from Gaza cities. Netanyahu had a different vision.
החמאס דורש תמורת שחרור חטופינו את סיום המלחמה, הוצאת כוחותינו מעזה, שחרור כל הרוצחים והאנסים של הנוח'בה, והשארת חמאס על כנו. אם נסכים לכך, לוחמינו נפלו לשווא. אם נסכים לכך, לא נוכל להבטיח את ביטחון אזרחינו, לא נוכל להחזיר את המפונים בבטחה לבתיהם, וה-7 באוקטובר הבא יהיה רק עניין של זמן. אני לא מוכן להשלים עם פגיעה אנושה כזאת בביטחון ישראל, ולכן לא נסכים לכך.
The final stage envisions talks about a permanent ceasefire, normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia, and a new process leading to a Palestinian state. To this, too, the Prime Minister said no.
אני עומד על כך שאחרי שנשיג את הניצחון המוחלט, אחרי שנחסל את החמאס, לא יהיה בעזה שום גורם שמממן טרור, מחנך לטרור או משלח טרור. עזה חייבת להיות מפורזת בשליטה ביטחונית מלאה של מדינת ישראל. אני לא אתפשר על שליטה ביטחונית ישראלית מלאה על כל השטח ממערב לירדן.
And joining us now to discuss the deal and the deliberations in the Israeli War Cabinet is veteran journalist, attorney, and author Benzal Yamini. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So a peace deal that has been put on the table now by the United States, Egypt, and Qatar is asking for very serious sacrifices on the Israeli side and would essentially ensure Hamas remains in power. Benjamin Netanyahu, of course, rejecting this deal. What's your analysis of the deal?
Yeah, my main problem is not what's this deal or another deal. The main problem is that what we see is a kind of fixation. I mean, where is the Israeli initiative? I don't see it. I don't see it. And that's what makes us all kind of wondering what's going on. So, yes, of course, the deal that was offered and was published last weekend is not what we are looking for, because the meaning is a total surrender of Israel and leaving the Hamas intact, actually controlling the whole Gaza Strip. I mean, that's not why we went to retaliate after the terrible attack of October 7. But what Israel is doing, what is the end game? And many of us do not know. Maybe Netanyahu knows some things that we do not know. But in order to continue, in order to give us power, to empower us, the people, to empower the soldiers, we should know what's going on, and we do not know, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. And yet Prime Minister Netanyahu, as I mentioned, he's outright rejected such a deal, or he said essentially any deal that would give in to Hamas. But yet there are others within his war cabinet that would consider such a deal. And you, of course, wrote a very interesting column on this. Can you perhaps give us sort of an inside look into these calculations that are happening, in the war cabinet?
Yeah. Okay, first of all, yes, we know that there are differences. I mean, from one hand, Gadi Eisenkot and Benny Gantz that joined this government. It's not exactly a unity government, but they joined the government. And they are willing for more concessions comparing to Benjamin Netanyahu. But I think even them, and it's not that I think, I know that even them will not accept the deal that was offered at the last weekend, because the meaning is, as I said, it's a total surrender of Israel. This is unspeakable. But maybe, just maybe, if there will be another offer, we will see more differences. Right now, there is a rumor today that maybe Benjamin Netanyahu himself is offering something. We don't know yet what. We don't know, because we have no details. If he is initiating something, okay, thanks God, eventually. He should have done it much before. Why now? More than 100 years, more than 100 days after the October 7th. I mean, Israel could initiate a lot, much earlier.
After October 7th, do you think that the Israeli public is open to discussing, the establishment of a Palestinian state?
Let me remind something to all of us. I mean, it was Israel, and before that it was even Ben-Gurion, before the foundation of Israel. Israel will always, to any partition resolution, Israel said yes. It was always the Arabs and later the Palestinians who said no. I don't want to change places. I don't want to be like the Arabs. The Arabs said no, and what did they receive? Nakba and more Nakbas. I mean, Israel is prospering because Israel always said yes. So let's not change. We can say yes. It doesn't mean that the Palestinian state is going to be established. And if at all, we have so many security measures to speak about. We have so many preconditions, so it's not something that is going to happen, not tomorrow and not even next year.
All right, Benzal Yamini, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us and for your analysis.
Thank you so much for having me.
Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team. as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative, available on the web, Android, and Apple. And the EU is also making its voice heard over the ongoing Gaza war as it convened a meeting today outlining an EU peace deal. At the meeting, the Israeli foreign minister and his counterparts from the Palestinian Authority and Arab states attended. The details in the following report. Israeli Foreign Minister Israel Katz addressed the European Union Foreign Affairs Council on Monday in Brussels in a meeting also attended by his counterparts from the Palestinian Authority, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, and the Secretary General of the Arab League. Katz said he came to Brussels to focus on two main issues: bringing the hostages back home and restoring Israel's security after the October 7th attack. The meeting was convened to discuss the ongoing war against Hamas in Gaza and prospects for a comprehensive peace. EU Security Chief Joseph Borrell presented his 10-point plan for peace between Israel and the Palestinians, a plan which calls for the establishment of a two-state solution. Ahead of the meeting, the EU's diplomatic service sent a discussion paper to its 27 member countries suggesting a roadmap to peace in the broader Israeli-Palestinian conflict. According to Reuters, at the heart of the plan is a call for a preparatory peace conference to be organized by the EU, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and the League of Arab States, with the United States and the United Nations also invited to the gathering. This conference would take place even if Israel were to decline participation. The paper also calls for consequences for both sides should they reject the plan, though it does not elaborate on what the consequences would be. Yet, despite the grandiose plan, the EU remains deeply divided in its response to the war in Gaza, and it remains unlikely that the EU will be able to reach a consensus on the issue. And joining us now with more on the negotiations for a new potential deal is Arya Lightstone, former advisor to U.S. Ambassador David Friedman and one of the leading architects behind the Abraham Accords. Arya, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So look, a lot of initiatives reportedly being put on the table. There's the U.S.-Saudi deal, the U.S.-Qatari and Egyptian deal, and also now this EU deal. It seems all deals are calling for the eventual establishment of a Palestinian state, something Prime Minister Netanyahu has firmly rejected, in order to bring stability to the region at large. So what's your assessment of this?
Well, my assessment is we've gone to the pre-Trump days, which means people will throw lots of stuff on a piece of paper, even if it has no chance of success or any sense of realism, mostly to appeal to their constituencies at home. People like to say that Prime Minister Netanyahu is the one who is the obstacle here. President Herzog in Davos was the one who said that the people of Israel today are not ready to have a conversation regarding peace in the region, because they're not. There are young men who are dying on the front. There are hostages who are still being kept by the avowed enemies of the state of Israel. This is not the time to be talking about these proposals. And once again, these quote experts are not only tone deaf, but dumb.
Mm-hmm. And so I want to ask, because behind the scenes, it seems especially that the moderate Arab states at least want Israel to eliminate Hamas. It's a very destabilizing actor in the region, of course. But on the other hand, publicly, they are out there calling for a ceasefire, which would essentially leave Hamas in power. So with regards to the Arab states, I mean, what's really going on here? What is driving these Arab states like the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, I'm not positive anybody's calling to leave Hamas in power. I think that there's a disparity of information that gets out there. So, for example, in the U.S., we've seen the statistics, whether it's 86-14 or 90-10, in terms of just the sheer volume of noise and news that proclaims that Israel is the aggressor and the oppressor. Now, fast forward that to the Middle East. Even in the UAE, you wind up with it being 99.9 to 0.01. So tell me, after 109 days of that, of explaining that, right, they served President Herzog in Switzerland or threatened to serve him with war crimes. At some point in time, the volume of information makes it overwhelming. I do not believe that there is a single leader in the moderate or immoderate Arab states who want to see Hamas left in charge of Gaza, other than obviously our buddies in Iran who are driving for that completely and totally. However, they're competing against the information, much of it perpetrated by Al Jazeera and the like, that claims that Israel's in the middle of war crimes. And unless the United States of America stands up and assuredly asserts that no such thing is going on, and Hamas is still there, and we support Israel until the elimination of Hamas, those will continue to be the calls from the moderate Arab states.
And so you mentioned sort of going back to the pre-Trump era, the Saudi foreign minister just this week once again reiterating that the only way to achieve a Saudi-Israeli peace deal is to first solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This was something that sort of debunked, let's say, with the Abraham Accords. So why is Saudi Arabia now returning to this, hinging peace on this? Is it simply posturing, or do they really mean it?
Well, the disappointing part about the entire region is that the region, look, there's one superpower in the world, it's the United States of America. Until we surrender that, which the current administration is doing their best to do, when the superpower in the world does not create vision and clarity and opportunity, nobody else in the region is going to be able to do that. If you just look at the region, it's a series of bilateral relations. The only sort of multilateral platform that exists is the United States of America that can steer the entire region towards peace and prosperity, which is what it was doing. When that stopped, when the region then was challenged to deal with Iran on its own or the Israel other Arab country relations on their own. So suddenly you go back to what it looked like pre-Trump. I don't think anybody would take that ticket if they had a choice to continue on the line of the Abraham Accords or to go back to the Oslo Accords. They would all take the Abraham Accords.
Mm-hmm. And, I am curious in speaking about the Abraham Accords, Qatar, I'm interested in hearing Qatar's role in all of this because, during your time working on the Abraham Accords, what can you tell us about Qatar's stance? Was there any sort of behind-the-scenes, discussions with Qatar, any chance at peace with Qatar?
I've never communicated with Qatar, so I don't have any meaningful experience in terms of whether they would or would not be joining the Abraham Accords. They certainly were not on the short list at the time that the end of the Trump administration was happening. I will tell you this, that October 7th requires a reanalysis of the entire region. Look, Israel has to reimagine who it can be and who it should be. The Saudis need to do the same. Anybody who wants to have foreign policy based upon October 5th is doing the wrong thing. So Qatar, who served many different useful purposes prior to October 7th, needs to now reanalyze what type of region they want and where they want their place to be in that region. Again, this goes back to the United States of America. If the United States of America sets a high bar and demands a lot from our allies, in exchange we give so much back in return, then those allies will reach up and likely achieve that. If we keep a low bar and do not set meaningful expectations, for example, Secretary of State Blinken's reflexive reaction to a two-state solution and revitalized PA, tell me what else the United States of America can do that we haven't tried over the last 40 years to make a revitalized PA. It has not worked for the last 40 years. What makes you think it'll work in the next 40 years? These ideas are boring. These ideas don't work. But because we, the United States of America, sets them, it's very difficult for another country to break out of them.
All right, Arya Lightstone, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you.
And in other news, the Shin Bet border police and Jerusalem police announced on Monday that they had arrested 2 ISIS supporters who intended to carry out a chemical terror attack in Israel. The 2 had pledged allegiance to the radical jihadi group and were able to acquire chemical materials for explosives and wanted to attack civilians in the Jerusalem area. And moving on, diplomatic efforts to end the cross-border fighting with Hezbollah on the northern border have yet to make any progress. Israel will reportedly intensify its response if no agreement is reached by the end of this month. Meanwhile, a troubling increase in Russian military activity in Syria. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
Israel plans to escalate fighting on the Lebanese border with Hezbollah by the end of the month if there is no long-term diplomatic agreement in place. That's the word from both Western and Lebanese officials, who told the Washington Post that the window for a diplomatic agreement between Israel and Hezbollah was starting to shut. The IDF continues to exact a heavy price on Hezbollah. An airstrike in South Lebanon killed 2 members of the Gaza-based Hamas terror group as they were traveling in a car. This as the IDF carried out several waves of airstrikes against Hezbollah targets in South Lebanon as the tit-for-tat cross-border exchanges continue. The sites hit include an observation post, rocket launch positions, and other infrastructure belonging to the terror group. Tanks also carried out shelling in the Mount Dove area to remove a threat. In a call, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant told his American counterpart, Lloyd Austin, that Israel was nearing a decision point on Lebanon as Hezbollah presses its daily attacks on the northern border. Israeli officials said that Jerusalem still prefers a diplomatic solution, but will act if one is not achieved. Meanwhile, Moscow is increasing its military presence in Syria, announcing that Russian aircraft have begun patrols along the so-called Bravo line between Israel and Syria to monitor the situation. The not-so-subtle message to Israel: the Kremlin is displeased with Israel's alleged operations against Syria, Hezbollah, and Iranian interests, and is maneuvering for a reduction or cessation of these operations. This week, alleged Israeli airstrikes killed a top commander and 4 other Iranian Revolutionary Guard officers in Syria, with Tehran vowing revenge.
And as anti-Semitism is on the rise worldwide, it's a frightening and sad time for Jews across the world. ILTV's Arya Lightstone headed out in London to speak to some of the citizens and see if they themselves are feeling this increase of anti-Semitism, and hear what they think must be done to tackle it. Let's take a look.
I'm here now in London, where since the start of Israel's war against Hamas, we have seen an alarming rise in anti-Semitism. But how are the Jews in London really feeling, and what do they think can be done to tackle this anti-Semitism? Well, I'm about to speak to a few people to see what they have to say on the matter. Have you felt that there's been a surge of anti-Semitism in the UK?
Yes.
Hugely. Scarily and hugely.
We have felt a surge of anti-Semitism, yes. More than anti-Semitism, real hate.
Of course, there's been a surge. I've been feeling it quietly since Black Friday, since the whole economy went down. I've been quietly thinking to myself, we'll get it. We'll be the ones who are responsible.
And I have always been a proud wearer of my Magen David, and I've always worn it outside my clothes. And I found that when I'm with people, other Jews, they ask me to put it away because they're afraid.
It's not a good way to feel. It really isn't. Now we have to stand up and challenge it as ever, and that means standing up for Israel's right to exist.
Unite yourself, unite your synagogue, unite everybody. And be proud that you have gone back home to Israel and you are building your state.
So how do you think, apart from standing up as a community, we'll tackle this in the UK?
Well, all that it takes for evil to conquer is for, good people to stay silent.
The media has a lot to do with the rise of anti-Semitism, because it's legitimate to criticize Israel. It's legitimate to hate Israel. It's become very bon ton to shout hate and free Palestine. And the shocking thing is that most people don't even know which river and which sea we're talking about, and so they're completely ignorant, but they just shout what they're being told to shout.
Education.
There's too much stage propaganda for Hamas in the West, not just UK.
And people have to be open to listening, because most of these people, they're not open. They don't want to listen. They want to keep to their own narrative because they're comfortable with what they know, and they don't want to hear anything else.
We must not be judged on different standards from every minority in the world. It can't happen again, and we have to learn from history.
And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Mostly clear skies are expected tonight, alongside cool temperatures at lows of around 12 degrees Celsius or 54 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see partly cloudy skies and a slight drop in temperatures as light rain is expected to fall around most of the country. Temperatures should reach highs of 17 degrees Celsius or 63 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our ILTV channel, subscribe to our ILTV newsletter, and don't forget to check out our new and improved website, ILTV.tv, with all the latest news from the heart of the State of Israel. I'm Ladar Gravelazi. Be well, stay safe, and thank you so much for watching.